The Borno state government has said that 89 out of 276 abducted girls of the government girls' secondary school Chibok remain in captivity. The State Commissioner for Information and Internal Security Affairs, Professor Usman Tar, and his counterpart in Women Affairs, Zuwaira Gambo, disclosed this at a press conference to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the ugly event. Today, April 14, 2024, marks the 10th year anniversary of the abduction of the schoolgirls. According to them, the 187 girls rescued over 10 years include the 57 that escaped on the day of the abduction. They revealed that 108 were rescued by the security agencies and already reunited with their families. They said the 187 rescue girls were enrolled in capacity building centers and second chance schools initiative to make them self-reliant.
It's been 10 years since the girls were taken from their school in Chibok. 10 years in which the world has moved on, but the victims haven't. We spoke to one of the girls who escaped last year. We are not revealing her identity. She said, "I escaped because of the infight in the group, which led to the death of Abubakar Shekau." She and other girls have gone through a radicalization program. They are currently living in a house provided by the state government in Maiduguri. She says the conditions they are kept in are poor. They promise us that they will build houses for us so that every girl will have her own house free of charge, and every girl will be issued the house documents. That's what they promise us. But as it is now, even to get a detergent or soap to wash our clothes is a problem for us. Life is so unbearable here. Life in the bush is far better than here.
For 10 years now, a lot of fake and empty promises were given by the government. Some, they will say they are on the top of the situations. They are trying to do their best for them to be rescued. Therefore, life is frustrating with the parents. A lot have died. Over 30 of these parents have died of various ailments related to depressions, kind of heart problems. Just anxieties have, engulfed all their lives. So life is generally poor, bitter, frustrating. Just name whatever you think it is best to describe the situation in Chibok.
The Borno state government says the rescued girls are receiving therapy and have been enrolled in a skills program. They have not yet been reunited with their families.
The Borno state government took over their rehabilitation, giving them mental health and psychosocial support. We had to stabilize them because when they came out, they were highly traumatized because of the problems they went through in the bush. Having done this assessment and in consultation with them and their parents, it was collectively agreed that they cannot go back to the normal school, that is secondary school or women teachers college. And so fortunately for us, the Borno state government has what we call the second chance school. It's a complete, a holistic school that gives both vocational and other services, including computer literacy, numerical lessons, and what have you. And so presently, these girls are attending the second chance school.
This is a wake-up call for the government to ensure proper care for the rescued girls and to redouble efforts in rescuing those who are still missing. In Maiduguri, Sani Adamu, Arise News.
Meanwhile, the kidnapping of the schoolgirls in Chibok changed each and every one of their lives. Here's the story of one girl who was one of the luckier ones, managing to jump out of the truck as she was taken away and sprint to safety. Arise correspondent Judita Da Silva reports.
10 years ago, Dina Lawan awoke to a living nightmare. Gunfire surrounded her as Boko Haram fighters stormed her school. But as she was being driven into the shadows, she managed to escape. Now she's pursuing a PhD at Berkeley in California. But that night is never far from Dina's mind.
I don't think two weeks will actually pass by without me at least remembering something from there. Because, I mean, it's inevitable. This journey itself, like, it's a product of that incident, right? I ended up in America. I mean, like me going to a private school, a better school, it all happened because of this incident. So whatever I do, I will always remember these incidents. And so, I mean, my friends are still in captivity.
Dina now dedicates her research to ensuring that what happened to her and her friends never happens again.
I, took multiple classes on violence, and I think almost all of my research, papers, mainly focus on, Boko Haram, how to dismantle Boko Haram, why this specific group, was originated, from the first place, the root causes of the organization.
What Dina went through would have broken some girls, and it did initially deter her from returning to school. But in the end, she was determined not to let the militants win.
Not going to school, for me at the time will kind of, give the power, to Boko Haram, the power they sought. Like, okay, this thing happened to you in school. We don't want you to go to school, and now you're not going to school, so we got you. We give you, we have the power now. So me not going to school will actually give them the power they think that, they had. So I was like, no, you are not going to take that away from me. I know I had I always had a dream prior to the kidnapping.
Dina now looks to the future, a future that at one point she wasn't sure she'd have.
Still on the commemoration of the 10th anniversary of the Chibok girls' abduction, the Borno State Commissioner for Information and Internal Security has sent a message of hope to Nigerians and families of the victims. The commissioner noted that the date is a painful remembrance ingrained in the collective memory of Nigerians, and the government will not rest until the last of the girls is reunited with their families. He added that the Borno State government identifies and sympathizes with all those affected by the abduction and notes that it is committed to the release of the remaining schoolgirls. According to the statement, out of the 276 abducted Chibok girls, 187 have been rescued and reunited with their families and have been enrolled in different schools and graduated under the supervision of the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs. The statement subsequently charged the security forces and intelligence agencies to step up their strategies and ensure the release of the remaining girls and protect other Nigerians in the face of insecurity bedeviling the country. Okay, the abduction of the Chibok schoolgirls left an indelible imprint on its annals, on Nigerian history, the world's biggest black nations. Issues around it forged public opinion in the presidential election year and ultimately unleashed insecurity at a level never seen before in Nigeria. It opened the floodgates of violence against institutions of learning, especially in the northern fringes of the country. And currently speaking, the frequency of attacks of a similar nature continues to be on the upward curve, despite the best efforts of the Nigerian military and security agency. what else can be done? Well, I'm now being joined by Dr. Kabir Adamu, a professional security and intelligence executive. Good to see you again on This Day Live, Dr. Adamu.
Thank you, Dr. Abati. I like how you're sounding. Sound like you ate a very healthy meal this afternoon.
Well, Dr. Adamu, well, where are we with this matter? We have tried kinetic solution, non-kinetic solution. We still have, some papers say 89 of the girls remaining in custody. Some say 91 remaining in custody. The parents have come forward to say, yes, their children are missing. And after Chibok, 20 years ago, we have had other cases of abduction, children from schools. What is the way forward? You are the security expert. Tell us.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Abati. You quoted Professor Tar, who is the Commissioner of Information and Security in Borno State, in your opening remarks. Now, he issued a statement yesterday, which you referenced. And in that statement, going by the Borno State government, what we have missing at the moment are 89 students from Chibok. And you're right, different platforms, different organizations provide varied figures, but I'll go with that one provided by the Borno State government. They are the custodians of these pupils when they got missing. And they work closely with the federal government. So if they say it's 89, I will leave it at that as 89. Now, why is it that 10 years down the road, we haven't been able to stop the abduction of our students? The most recent one happened in Kuriga, in Chikun local government in Kaduna State, when between 137 and about 287, depending on what figure you want to go with, were abducted. Between 2014 and 2024, 3 key policies have been initiated and quote-unquote implemented by the government. That is the Safe School Initiative in 2014. Then I think around 2019, the then government signed into the Safe School Declaration, which was an expansion, as it were, of the Safe School Initiative. And then, of course, more recently, in 2021, we gathered the entire world. And then at the end of that conference, we launched what was then called the National Policy on Safety, Security, and Violence-Free Schools, with an implementation guideline. Now, so it means that we don't lack policies, we don't lack initiatives. Now, with the benefit of the little review I've done on these 3 policies, what is missing is the buy-in of especially the state governments. Because security is in the concurrent list, and because education is in the concurrent list, different levels of government have roles to play within education. So when a federal policy like Safe School Initiative, the Safe School Declaration, or the national policy comes out, it would require the buy-in of the state governments. And from what I can see, with the benefit of hindsight, we haven't gotten that buy-in as much as we should. When Kuriga happened, for those of us that visited the school, you saw that in the minimum, there wasn't even a fence in that school. Now, the national policy on safety, security, and violence-free school requires that every school in the country, in the minimum, should have a fence. It also requires 4 layers of security, some of them within the school, others within the environment where the school is located, and then, of course, the role of the security agencies, and then lastly, the role of stakeholders, including parents and other stakeholders. Now, as an expert, I've looked at that policy, and I'm very happy with that policy. It's been experimented in other parts of the world, including Pakistan, and we've seen the result. So what is missing, to answer your question directly, is the lack of implementation of these very beautiful policies. And part of the challenge actually is funding. To build a fence around schools, in the whole of the country would require a lot of funding, and unfortunately, that funding is not available at the moment. And like I said, because there is no buy-in from the state governments, there is no unison in terms of effort between the federal and state government to provide the requisite funding that will allow for the implementation of that policy. Now there is a department, I think, within the Ministry of Finance with someone who has the responsibility to mobilize funding for that, but we haven't seen much effort in that regard. It was introduced in 2021, 3 years down the road. Not much has been done in that regard, Frank.
Okay, Dr. Adamu, can we interrogate this your point about Safe Schools Initiative further? I was in government, I think, in 2014, when the Jonathan administration collaborated with Gordon Brown and the Ministry of Finance of Nigeria to introduce this Safe Schools Initiative. Now, those governors that you are saying do not have a buy-in, how much power do they have? Considering the fact that they are called chief security officers under the law, but can they, in reality, make any difference? Because these state governors say, look, we are incapacitated. And now here you are saying that the state governors do not implement the policy. What exactly is wrong with the Safe Schools Initiative? Beyond funding, beyond
so governors
theory.
I think, I can say a lot, but in summary, it's perhaps our lack of appreciation of the importance of education within the imperatives of our national aspirations. Governors have a lot role to play in this regard. Like I said, education is in the concurrent list, and so governors have schools that are under their control. Now, as a governor, if you know a school is vulnerable and you allow that school to operate and then kids are abducted, it is your responsibility. I don't see how you can shift that responsibility to another level of government, because you are the one who opened that school. You are the one who is operating that school. In the minimum, Dr. Abati, the governors should be able to conduct risk vulnerability assessments to identify the vulnerabilities. Now, I know a few governors have done that. And on the basis of that, they shut down some schools, and then in certain areas, reverted some schools to daytime instead of the burden that they were before. A good model actually is the Borno model, where several schools were shut down and then mega schools were built to accommodate those ones that were shut. The point is, as a governor, you should never leave a school vulnerable, knowing very well that the threat element that exists within the state that you govern can go to that school and abduct students, like it happened in Kaduna State. So when you ask me what role the governors can play, a lot. As long as this education remains in the concurrent list, as long as governors have control over those schools, then it is their responsibility to protect the schools. Now, where the argument becomes complex is, yes, governors don't have absolute control over the federal security departments. But the provision of physical security, and please, I'm using my word carefully. I want to emphasize the provision of physical security is just one element within the school safety program. There are several other elements, like it's provided for within the national policy on safety, security, and violence-free schools that is outside physical security. And all it takes is for the governors to provide that, so that at the end of the day, what we have is a system of protection and not just necessarily physical security that sometimes can fail. When you have layers of security, just like that, they say the national policy provides for, even when one fails, the other one should be able to protect. So yes, funding is a challenge. challenge, I agree, but then we've had enough time to see how we can mobilize funding. Gordon Brown did mobilize a lot of funding. I know that several development partners did donate to the Safe School Initiative. And then, of course, like I said recently, when we gathered the world here, a lot of funding was also put forward by our development partners. So that's the beginning step. It's not enough, but at least we should start somewhere. The beauty of the national policy on safety, security, and violence-free school is that it provides an implementation guideline. I can't remember in the recent past where I've seen any policy of government that includes an implementation guideline, but this particular policy has an implementation guideline. So in the minimum, what the governors can do is to get M&E specialists, monitoring and evaluation specialists, to help them to develop that implementation guidelines into KPIs that they can now monitor to say, okay, in the local government that I have 20 local governments. How many schools do I have in those local governments? How many have met the minimum standards as provided for in that policy? And of course, the ones that have not met, what do I need in terms of funding? What can I provide as a governor? And then where do I need the additional funding? There are so many development partners out there, from the World Bank down to UNICEF, name them, that are ready to assist once you can provide in a verifiable manner that this is what you intend to do with the funding. So, Dr. Abati, governors can do a lot beyond what they are doing at the moment.
Okay, but let me ask you. I mean, these ladies who are there, we have the issue of the Stockholm Syndrome. Some of them have told their parents that they are not coming back home. They are identifying with the same people who abducted them in Borno State. They say they have children for these abductors, and they are not coming home, and they prefer to be with the people who abducted them. Can you speak to that issue? What can the Nigerian government do about that? Because we have had parents here complaining that, look, why is it that these girls say they don't want to come back? They are happier with the abductors. We deal with a contradiction in that regard.
So first off, I want to emphasize that the Stockholm Syndrome is real. It's been scientifically studied. It's been quote-unquote proven. So we need to acknowledge the fact that it can happen. I see a lot of disbelief and sometimes even consternation among Nigerians when they hear stories like that. I think that's not helping anyone. We need to admit and agree to the fact that Stockholm Syndrome is real. It can happen. Anyone who is subjected to that type of circumstances and then, is subjected to the kind of intimacy that happens between, quote unquote, a husband and wife over a period. And remember, the person in this instance, they were teenagers at a very young age, between the ages of 14 and 18 when they were abducted. So some of them, that's the first time they are experiencing any contact with a man. And that's all they know in their life. And if that syndrome develops, then what we should ask ourselves is, what are the provisions for the potential for reversing that syndrome? And the good thing is that science has evolved over time. There are options that are readily available, including, for instance, the minimum psychosocial support that would help these girls understand what has happened to them, because it's only when they understand what has happened to them that they can now start thinking of what next. Is it a reversal syndrome? The other options are also, like in the Borno model that I mentioned, the option for resettlement is also there. In other words, the families, when they are retrieved or released or rescued, depending on what you want to use, once they are subjected to the processes under the Borno model. Now, is the husband a repentant member of the Jamaat al-Ahl al-Sunnah al-Dawati wal-Jihad, or a member of the Islamic State in West Africa province? Will he be rehabilitated, perhaps under transitional justice processes such as the Operation Safe Corridor? And then, of course, once he is confirmed and endorsed as rehabilitated, is he going to be released back to the society and join his wife and children? So my point is that we need to first admit that Stockholm Syndrome is real, and then we now subject the victims through the processes that can help them at least live something near a normal life. Denial of its existence is not helping anyone at the moment. So when the girls say they are going back to their husbands, it means they are victims of Stockholm Syndrome, and it means they need help. Psychosocial help, psychological help, and even social help, and sometimes even economic, as the case may be. So perhaps a combination of effort between the state government, the federal government, development partners, NGOs is what we should now be discussing on how to support these girls. I know under this Second Chance School in Borno, they are doing elements of that, but the Borno state government needs help inside of the kind of consternation I'm seeing at the moment from different stakeholders in Nigeria.
Okay, Stockholm Syndrome is when the victim identifies and begins to believe in the position of the abductor. But can you speak through the issue about non-kinetic, approach that the Nigerian government has been talking about? What's the way forward? Because after 2014, we have had many more cases, Dapchi, Chibok. We have had so many cases in Kaduna of abduction. So the people who abduct Nigerian children, students, persons, they have not been discouraged. What is the missing link? What is it that the Nigerian government is not paying attention to, whether kinetic or not kinetic?
In simple terms, Dr. Abati, it is the deterrence element within our justice system that, frankly, we've not strengthened. These threat elements, depending on what region of the country they are, so as an example, in the Northeast, the ideological groups such as Jamaat al-Fil and il-Dawati wal-Jihad, and then the Islamic State in West Africa province or Ansaru, if they abduct, their reason is usually either to achieve a political objective or sometimes a financial incentive. Now, in the Northwest, when they abduct, the objective is usually the same. Financial objective, sometimes political, and then lastly is to achieve some social elevation within the group in terms of the profile of the commanders who carry out that abduction. So the challenge is this. They are able to do this sometimes with very little resistance from our security forces. Now, after they've done it, they are also able to collect their ransom with very little resistance or difficulties. And then more importantly, number 3, Dr. Abati, they're able to spend that ransom with no consequences. So that means the deterrence element that should have been applied across these 3 spectrum, conduit that I've mentioned is missing. When the action is committed and there is no consequence, when they now hold and collect ransom and there is no consequence, when they now also spend the ransom and there is no consequence, then what it means is that other groups are also encouraged to carry out. So that deterrence element, the strengthening of our criminal justice system to be able to arrest and punish offenders in a manner that would now discourage other would-be offenders from committing such act, unfortunately, is what is missing. Another thing that is also a bit of a concern, the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act, as amended 2021, bans almost in its entirety the giving out of ransoms. And since this government came in, it has repeatedly emphasized that it would not pay ransom for such cases. Now, the worrisome element is this, Dr. Abati, 89 of these girls are still in the hands of these abductors. We've not heard from the current government how they intend to go about. If they're not paying ransom, then what's the strategy? How are they going to bring out these girls? Leah Sharibu is at the moment in the hands of these abductors, and government is not going to pay ransom. So how are they going to bring the girl out? So things like that, where you have a challenge, and then the strategy is not being released to the Nigerians so that Nigerians can understand and, of course, fall behind the government. Because I keep on saying the government needs the buy-in of the people. And if the government does not disclose to the people how it's approaching these issues, then it will be very difficult for that buy-in to be bought. So again, I think it's an issue of deterrence that is kind of missing. And then the second point is this haphazard nature in how we approach the policies around managing some of these security challenges. By the way, for the avoidance of doubt, I'm totally supportive of the non-payment of ransom. However, once you allow the incident to occur, in other words, the victim is in the hands of the perpetrator, then you must come up with a strategy. And that strategy should not have nothing off the table. Options should be as open as possible until that person is brought out. Like I said, there are three elements: the collection of the ransom, the usage of that ransom, and then what consequences would follow all of that.
Okay, Dr. Adamu, I mean, I get all your points. But one of the things we've been talking about with regard to the Safe Schools Initiative has been the fencing of schools. Why is it so difficult for the Nigerian government to fence the schools? You say it's concurrent. Yes, fine. It's concurrent. Federal government and state government and local councils. So why is it so difficult for us to just erect a fence around our schools? What do you think is responsible for that?
Honestly, I think it's an absence of perhaps lack of appreciation of the relevance of such an activity. The irony is that we don't even have an idea of how many schools are unfenced. Dr. Abati, that's the challenge. I think is at the moment, I recently had the Minister of Education indicating that perhaps one of the first things they would do is to conduct a survey to get a sense of how many schools are unfenced at the moment. So perhaps it tells you how we probably don't value such issues. If schools can be erected without fences, I mean, pictures of certain schools, when they emerge, you would realize that perhaps there are even some things that are more important than the fence. And so when the funds come, they go to those things. I mean, I've seen schools where the walls are as good as even falling down, or the ceilings are falling down on students. Even here in Abuja, I've been to schools where you see cracks on the wall, and you wonder if during rainy season, if it's raining, how students will survive in such a school. So when monies come to such schools, perhaps they will use them for other things instead of fencing. What I think perhaps as a country we should do is to do that survey, identify the schools, I mean, across the board, schools that are managed by the federal government and those that are with the state government, and then come up with at least a sense of how much is needed in terms of funds. And then, like I said, we have development partners that are happy to support in that regard. And perhaps what we need to do is to show, that we're going to do it in a manner that would not allow to the misuse of funds or abuse of funds. And I'm sure they will be ready to support us in that regard.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kabiru Adamu. 10 years after the abduction of the Chibok girls. Very unfortunate incident, but Nigeria continues to grapple with the challenge.